Hi, I'm Leo and welcome to my YouTube channel Me. In this tutorial, I'll be discussing some advanced CSS selectors, and I'm going to start with the pseudo class selectors and the pseudo element selectors. So please, at the end of the video, if you think the video is helpful, please hit the like button, and if you have anything to say about any part of the video, just leave a comment, and if you're new, please consider subscribing. Now we use the pseudo class selectors and the pseudo element selectors to target parts of an element that cannot be targeted with your combinators or simple selectors like the class and id. Now the pseudo class selectors and the pseudo element selectors, they have the same syntax, the difference being that the pseudo class selectors go with a single colon while the pseudo element selectors go with a double colon, although a single column would also work for the pseudo element selectors. Now I'm going to start with the pseudo element selectors. Now sometimes when you go to a website, now this is very common with newspapers and magazines, you discover that the first letter or the first line has a different styling compared to the rest of the paragraph. Now this is one of the applications of the pseudo element selectors. We use the pseudo element selectors to apply a style rule to the first line or the first letter of the specified element, and the properties we can apply to this first letter or first line include the color, the font properties, the background properties, vertical align, line height, word spacing, letter spacing, text decoration, and text transform. Now for your first letter, you can actually add a margin or a padding. Now when you go back, you'd see that I have a margin here. Now I have a paragraph here, three paragraphs actually, and I want to style up the middle paragraph, so I'll go to my code and do that. Now in my HTML file, I have three paragraphs. The first one has a class with the name para1, the second with the name para2, and the third with the name para3. So I'm going to style up the middle one. So I'll go to my CSS file and I'll put my p, which is the paragraph, and I'll put my class selector, which would be dot para2. And now I'll put my double colon and put the first line, and I'll open up my curly braces. Now let's say I want to give it a letter spacing of 1 rem, and I want to give it a background color of let's say black. 1 2 3 4 5 6, and I want to give it a color of white. Is going to be 1 2 3. Now when I save and go back to my code and reload, you will notice that a different style has been given to the first line of this paragraph. Now let's say I want to style up the first letter. I'll do the same thing, and alright, I'll change this line to letter, and I'll open up my curly braces. Let's say I want to change the font size. I'll put a font size and let's say 3 rem, and let's say I want to give it a margin. I'll put a margin, and I'll set it to 2 rem. Now when I save and go back to my browser, notice that the first letter is going to have a different styling. You can see it's bigger now and there's a little space here. I can actually increase the margin to 3 rem. Now when I save and go back, you'll notice that the margin, that's the space here, would increase. I can also decide to change the color of this, and let's say I want it to be blue. I can put a color and set it to blue. Now when I save and go back to my browser, you'll notice that the first letter has a different color. Now this is one of the applications of the pseudo element selector. Alright, next is the pseudo class selectors. Now basically we use pseudo class selectors to select elements based on their attributes, states, and relative position. Now I'm going to start with the first child, the last child, and the nth child. Now in my HTML code here, I have a list here named 1 to 10. Now these lists, they have positions from 1 to 10. So using the pseudo class, I'm going to apply a style to any of these lists based on their position. Now I'm going to go to my CSS file and I'll put my selector, which is the links, and I'll put a space and I'll put my sign and I'll put my list and I'll put my single column. Now let's say I want to style up the first child. Now the first child would be the first list here. So I'll go back to my code and I'll put first child and I'll open up my curly braces. Now let's say I want to give it a color of red. Now when I save and go back to my browser, you would notice that the first item here, which is the first child, is going to take that styling. Now you can see that. Now for the last child, when I come here and put last child, you'll notice that the last item is going to take the style. Now when I go back, you notice that the last item here has taken the color. Now that's the first child and the last child. Now the next one is the nth child. Now for the nth child, you can actually use that to target any item on the list. Now let's say I want to style up all the Now let's say I want to style up all my odd numbers. Now the odd numbers would be 1, 3, 5, 7. Now I'll go to my list and I'll put the term odd, meaning I want to style up all the lists in the odd number position. Now when I reload, notice that all the lists in the odd number position, they will take the style. Now if I want to style up all the lists in the even number position, which would be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and when I reload, you will notice that all my items in the even number position have been styled. Now let's say I want to style up the second element. I can actually put 2 and save. When I go back, you'll notice that the second element will have the style. Now let's say I want to style up the fifth element. I can actually put 5 here, and when I go back, you'll notice that the fifth element has been styled. Now this is how you use the first child, the last child, and the nth child. Now next up, I'll move to the first of type, last of type, and nth of type. Alright, we use the first of type, last of type, and nth of type to select elements which are of the same type within a particular parent. Now you can notice I have about 4 divs here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they are all contained in this order div with the class main. So because they are all divs, they are of the same type, so I can actually target anyone in any position using the first of type, last of type, or nth of type. Now I'll go to my CSS file, and now this is what I have here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll go to my CSS file, and using the first of type, I am going to target the first element. Now when I go to my CSS file and put my selector, which would be dot main, and I'll put the greater than sign, and I'll put my div. Now what I'm saying is this is my selector, but my target element is the div. Now I'm going to put my colon, and I'll put first of type. And I'll open up my curly braces. Let's say I want to give it a color of red. Now when I save and go back to my browser and reload, you would notice that the first letter is going to get the styling. Now let's say I want to style up the last one. Now you would also notice that they all have, although they have different class, you can see the first one, the class is yeah, nay, yep, and nope, but they still take the styling because they are all of the same type. Now for the last of type, I'll come here and put last of type. Now when I save and go back to my browser, you would notice that the last element will take the styling. Now you can use the nth-child, nth-of type to actually target any div within that parent. So when I put my nth-of type, I'm going to tell the browser which one. So when I put odd like I did before and save, you will notice that all the elements within the odd position, which would be 1 and 3 for this one, would take the style. Now when I go back and put even, you would also notice that all the elements within the even position, which would be your 2 and 4 here, they would take the style. Now when I go there and also put, let's say I put 3 here, when I go back, you would notice that the elements in the third position would take the style. Now basically this is how you use the first of type, last of type, and the nth of type. So next I'll move to hover, focus, active, and visited. Now most times we use these properties to style our links. Now basically your browser actually has a default styling for your active, visited, hover, and etc. For example, you would see that the color is actually blue. Now when I click, you notice the color changes to red. But using this pseudo classes, you can actually determine what you want these colors to be. Now here I have 4 links here, and I want to style them off. Now I'll put my selector, which would be dot main. I'll put my greater than sign, and I'm targeting my anchor tag, and I'll put my single column. Now I want to add a hover. Now a hover, what I'm saying is when I move my cursor across the link, I want this style to, I want it to take this style. Now let's say my text decoration, I want to set it to none, and I want the color to change to red when I hover on that particular link, and I want to give it a font size of let's say 4.5 rem. Now when I save and go back to my browser and reload, now you will notice that as I hover or move my cursor across, you can see that the style is applied. Now you can also use that for your focus, which would mean when I click on the link or when I'm on the link, this is what I want it to be. Now let's say I want to give it a color of green when I focus on the list. So when I save and go back to my browser, notice that as I click on the list, nothing happens. But when I reload now, when I click, you would see it changes to green. Now you can actually combine all of this. Now let me copy this and put my hover here and change the color to red. Now you can see that when I reload, when I hover, it turns red, but when I click, it turns green. So you can do that for your focus, your visited, and order style. All right, basically these are some of the applications or some of the ways you can use the pseudo class selectors. Now there are other ways which I didn't state here, which you can find online, and I hope this video was helpful. And I'm also sorry that I've not been posting for some time now. I've been having some issues with my system. All right, thanks guys for watching, and